And the time will come, then all is over with that faith also, and the idea of the fatherland is dead. And then perhaps we shall be envied as we envy the saints, their inward and irresistible strength. This, I should add, is the same Junger who deified the Free Corps massacres of communists and Spartacists in Munich in 1919, by identifying each member of the Free Corps as the new man, the storm soldier, the elite of Middle Europa, a completely new race, cunning, strong and purposeful. New forms must be moulded with blood, and power must be sealed with a hard kiss. Thus the Great War, in the words of its veterans, either gave their lives a sense of hopelessness, a vacuum of meaning for my dad, an experience that would forever encourage them to avoid war, or in the case of men like Junger, a new kind of purpose, forged in blood and pain that would necessitate yet another war in order to prove the worth of the first one. No wonder that in 1919, Clemenceau predicted that the Versailles Treaty was merely a 20-year ceasefire. His timing was absolutely correct. But my dad faced his own inner conflict in the months immediately after the war when he remained in France, still in uniform, in case the November 11th ceasefire broke down. He was asked to command a firing party to execute a young Australian soldier serving in the British Army, who, the soldier was 20, the same age as my father at the time, was absent without leave in Paris, and in a drunken dispute shot dead a British military policeman. Condemned to death, Richard Mellor, who had adopted the name of another soldier, Gunner Frank Wills, made a last appeal to the military court, a copy of which I possess. These are his moving words. I am 20 years of age. I joined the Australian Army in 1915 when I was 16 years of age. I went to Egypt and Dardanelles. I have been in a considerable number of engagements there and in France. I joined the British Army in April 1918 and came to France in June 1918. I was persuaded to leave my unit by my friends and I got into bad company. I began to drink and gamble heavily. I had no intention whatever of committing the offences for which I am now before the court. I asked the court to take into consideration my youth and to give me a chance of leading an upright and straightforward life in the future. The court decided that he should not be given that chance. I am sure that Ernst Junger would have agreed with that decision. But my father, faced with this young man's execution, refused to command the firing party, and that did for his military career. In later life, I have to tell you, Bill Fisk was a very conservative, right-wing man, a firm believer in capital punishment, a strong-willed character with whom I came into frequent and angry conflict. But he refused to kill the Australian soldier, and I regard this as the finest act of his life. Alas, Mellor was executed by another British officer at 14 minutes past 4 on the morning of the 27th of May 1919 and lies today under the name of Gunner Frank Wills of the Royal Field Artillery in the Sainte Marie Cemetery at Le Havre, grave number 64/6/F/5. So what persuaded my dad to refuse to kill his fellow soldier? On the first night of peace, 91 years ago tomorrow, he was billeted in the tiny French village of Louvencourt near Albert. In 1956, he showed me the old French cottage in which he lived. I returned again long after his death to find that there had been, indeed there still is, a British war cemetery virtually outside his bedroom window. One of the soldiers buried there was Roland Leighton, the young man whose grief-stricken fiancée Vera Britton was to write Testament of Youth, that literary monument to human loss. But there were two other men lying in the same cemetery which might have held a special meaning for Bill Fisk. Both had been shot at dawn by firing squad. Private Harry MacDonald of the 12th West Yorks, the father of 3 children, was executed here for desertion on the 4th of November 1916. Rifleman F.M. Barrett of the 78th King's Royal Rifle Corps was shot for desertion on the 10th of July 1917. Did Second Lieutenant Bill Fisk know who they were? Had their graves so near to his bedroom windows spoken to his conscience when he was asked to command a firing party and kill an Australian soldier? But what of those who refused to kill or serve in any war? Desertion was a crime in the British Army. Conscientious objectors were not shot, though they were much reviled. My father used to call them conches. After all, after dozens of postcards from his old Birkenhead schoolmates, all of which I have, all of whom died in the 1418 war, Bill headed off to Ireland and then to do his duty in the Third Battle of the Somme. He wasn't interested in men who wouldn't fight for their country. He gave me A.E.W. Mason's book novel, The Four Feathers, in which the hero leaves his regiment before the Sudanese campaign and is rewarded with 3 white feathers from his friends and 1 from his fiancée. Bill Fisk wasn't trying to teach me lessons about cowardice. He just didn't want his son to be a D.H. Lawrence writing poetry while his compatriots died in the mud for his privilege to do so. "Tell me, fella," Bill would say to me, "if the Nazis were coming for your mum and dad, wouldn't you fight for them?" Wyndham Lewis, reflecting on his desire to remain with his fellow soldiers here in Ypres at the front, found himself less inclined to immolate himself in defence of Mayfair, being only concerned at the idea of deserting my companions in misfortune. He recalled Lytton Strachey before one of the conscientious objection tribunal judges in London, a man whose words prefigure my father's own argument. "What," sternly asked one of the judges, "would you do, Mr. Strachey, if you discovered a German preparing to outrage your sister?" The Bloomsburys all exempted themselves in one way or another. Yet they had money and we hadn't. Ultimately, it was to keep them fat and prosperous that other people were to risk their lives. Then there were the tales of how a certain famous artist of military age and militant bearing would sit in the Café Royal and, addressing an admiring group back from the front, would explain, "We are the civilization for which you're fighting." Yet who could disagree, after the Great War, if not during its immense sacrifice, that the rules of war are largely a nonsense, an invention to transform mass murder into mass sacrifice. Today's article that strike me, articles, those novels, those novelists who speak to me, are best summed up by Tolstoy, especially in his devastating critique of Napoleon's invasion of Russia, which must be invoked here, because he wrote that war began. That is, an event took place opposed to human reason and to human nature. Millions of men perpetrated against one another such innumerable crimes, frauds, treacheries, thefts, incendiarisms and murders as in whole centuries are not recorded in the annals of all the law courts of all the world, but which those who committed them in war did not at the time regard as even being crimes. Again, through translation, Tolstoy too speaks our language. But what is happening to our language? Not just English, Flemish, French as well. Our generation, those of us who lived in the age of handwriting and typewriters, maintain the semantics of those who lived before us. For us, those soldiers of the First World War still speak to us as we might speak ourselves. Cast back in time, we might still come here to Ypres in 1915 or 1917 if we had a time machine, and walk up to those soldiers and chat to them and understand every word they said to us. We understand through instinct the meaning of Blunden's houses whitely glimmering, Apollinaire's metaphor of mimosa in bloom, Asquith's poplars in a row. But I do fear that we are permitting our wondrous computers to change our language. Ironically, I worry whether the words of those who cry out to us from the first war of industrial technology will be erased from our comprehension by the industrial technology of the email, the SMS, the blog, the Twitter.